And so you have people who are hurting,
Right.
and they're hurting a lot, and they want their pain to go away. And so we have this expectation that, oh, this person that I love and that I'm pledging my life to, they're going to help me make this pain go away. That somehow this other person, through this relationship that we call marriage, is going to make everything better. And I understand why it happens. When you get overwhelmed with all of the psychological turmoil, just it feels like it's this weight that's on you, and it can be very difficult to kind of pull yourself out of that and reach for the phone and ask for help.
This is Chat Over Popcorn, brought to you by Aspire Media and Marketing, hosted by Angela Ansa. Subscribe to our social media networks and follow the conversations on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Chat Over Popcorn, where the conversations run deep, starts now.
Welcome to Chat Over Popcorn, where the conversations run deep. My name is Angela Ansa, your host for the show. Today's show is about divorce, the impact it has on individuals' wellness, and how individuals can find emotional healing after a divorce. Joining me to discuss this very important topic is the one and only Dr. Anita Mercasani. Anita is a clinical psychologist, a dedicated wife, and a dedicated Christian. Dr. Anita has over 80 years of experience in leadership coaching. She has founded a new ministry called Be Still, where she fuses the healing power of Jesus Christ and the best of psychology. And her book, Be Still, really provide practical solutions, God solutions on how individuals can achieve wholeness, happiness, and eventually heal from any emotional heartbreak. You know, we live in a society, particularly living in this pandemic, where we are hurting, and we are hurting emotionally, and we don't have many resources out there that can guide us to heal from our traumas, heal from our past hurts and past relationships. And so this book here, and I'm going to let Dr. Anita talk briefly on the inspiration behind this book and how people can really achieve that ultimate wellness, right? And that's what Chat About Popcorn is about, is to bring people content on the dimensions of wellness and how, as a society, we can heal, we can grow, help people navigate, and ultimately achieve wellness. And her book is available on Amazon under her name, Anita Mercasani. Dr. Anita, welcome to Chat Over Popcorn.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be here, Angela. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about this very important topic.
Well, thank you for coming. I really appreciate you making the time to come today. So obviously, divorce is so prevalent in our society today. So before we even talk about how individuals end up becoming divorced, let's dive into what the Bible says about marriage, and then we get into why individuals end up divorcing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I think in order to talk about divorce, we have to talk about marriage. And we have to take a step back and understand what marriage is and what it is not, where it comes from, what its purpose is, and how God was really at the beginning of marriage,
Right.
and how He has established marriage for a purpose, for His purposes. And then we can start talking about divorce and when things go wrong. Marriage started at the Garden of Eden. He ordained that Adam and Eve were the first married couple, and that they were supposed to be fruitful and multiply and steward the creation that God had made for God's purposes. And that was the point of marriage, is to create more little Adams and Eves, and to go out and to steward His creation. And of course, people screwed it up. They got kicked out of Eden, and then marriage became hard, really, I think, from that point on. But God's purpose for marriage has never changed. God never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so the purpose that He had for marriage has not changed either. It just has become, because of social pressure, really hard to live out. And that's just a reality that we have to face, that society has developed a pressure that divorce is acceptable. And and kind of, just something we can keep in the wings if we need to, if things really start to become very difficult. And so it has undermined marriage even from the get-go. So it's just important to understand that marriage is still God's point, that he has a purpose for marriage, and that even all through in how Jesus talks about his bride, the church, that's how we are described. And so using the marriage language, that reflects how important marriage is to God.
Nobody go into marriage expecting it to fail, right? You go into marriage hoping that you have found your forever and you're gonna live life till God calls one of you. But clearly, 39%, that's a high number.
It is a high number.
So why are we failing at our marriages? What is causing us to end up divorced?
I think that there's a lot of factors actually at play, and I think that that's why it's the divorce has become at such a high rate. First of all, people don't often go into marriage understanding what marriage is for and what it's about, and they tend to view marriage as kind of the next logical step in a relationship that seems like it's going okay. And it's based a lot on feeling and emotion rather than what marriage is supposed to be, and then who each of us are supposed to be inside of marriage. And so we approach marriage with improper expectations of what's supposed to happen when we're married, and then what the other person, what our spouse, that role that the other person is supposed to play in our lives is, and oftentimes we just don't understand what that's supposed to be. And so improper expectations going into marriage really sets a stage for divorce being likely later on. Also, we bring our own personal pain, our own baggage, our own stuff into marriage. And when you look at the statistics around emotional pain, psychological disorders, it is at epidemic levels. So depression and anxiety in particular are at epidemic levels in Western society, America specifically. In any given year, 40 million American adults suffer from an anxiety disorder. 40 million American adults. That's a huge number of people. Way more than has ever been measured before. So we are in a psychologically a critical stage. So just kind of globally speaking, we're not doing well from a mental health standpoint, and we really haven't been for probably the past 20 years. It's been a slow decline. And so you have people who are hurting, and they're hurting a lot, and they want their pain to go away. And so we have this expectation that, oh, this person that I love and that I'm pledging my life to, they're going to help me make this pain go away. That somehow this other person, through this relationship that we call marriage, is going to make everything better. And the happily ever after sort of fantasy that many people have been sold through Disney movies and just media in general. And of course, that's not the case at all. Marriage is really hard. I mean, extremely challenging. And it is challenging for many people from the get-go. Like the first year in particular, learning how to be married. It's really hard. Well, when two really wounded people get married and they seek healing in the other person, which is never a good idea, never or very rarely possible, to say it that way. It just sets the stage for a really difficult marriage, because there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings and difficulty getting over hurt feelings, difficulty in forgiving transgressions, minor and major, of the other person. So certainly having your own stuff, and if it's a lot of stuff too, that can end up eventually being a cause for divorce. Having a mismatch in understanding how to manage money is a major cause for divorce. And you'd think, oh, why is that such a big deal? Well, money represents a lot of things to a lot of people. And when there is, again, a mismatch in how people think money should be managed, it can end up being a power struggle in a relationship, which then kind of devolves into a lot of other hurtful things and conflict, and that can lead to divorce. Just the stresses of being a parent. So if you have, so there's marriage, and then there's parenting, which is so having a child will magnify whatever the weakest part of your marriage is.
It's true.
So whatever is your thing that, your conflict with your spouse, whatever that is, and every marriage is different, having a child is going to magnify that issue. And you need to know that going in, because it's going to happen. Because being a parent is so stinking hard. It is, I mean, it will challenge you at every level.
It will.
Yeah.
It will,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. I mean, you're sleep deprived, even from an infant. You're sleep deprived. You're feeling demanded upon. People are feeling like they're being ignored. Their needs aren't being met. And you think, oh, I have this child, and why isn't so and so helping enough? And it just can get really. We get into our own hurts and very quickly. And so having children can be a major stress in a marriage, and not knowing how to negotiate those really tough times in a healthy way can set the stage for later on a divorce, because it builds.
Let's talk about the unique challenges that even entrepreneurs could face in a marriage, and why a lot of entrepreneurs end up divorcing.
They do. Actually, the data is very discouraging that there are more divorces in families where there's entrepreneur business owners than in like non-business owner families.
Right.
You know, so divorce is overrepresented. Let's say that in marriages where there's an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And it's because building a business is so hard. It's like having another child, but also having that child having to provide for the family. So it's like you have so much pressure on the business and building the business that it takes away, or could take away from the marriage. I mean, that's just because it is so stressful, and it involves everything. It's like having a child, for sure, because you have to nurture and care for your business and help it grow, just like we help our children grow. But it also hits the money issue.
It is.
You know, you have to take loans.
You got to bring home money. Okay?
Yes, you have to bring home money, and then there could be a mismatch between the spouses who think, well, we should go get another loan, or no, we need to be debt free, and then all just the money part of that, not even the money coming in, the revenue and the income, but just like, you know, how do we grow? And these are really challenging situations, and I've dealt with it for over 18 years and working with leaders and business owners and building their business, because businesses get to a certain point in the natural lifetime of a business where you have to make some really, there's a risk involved. Absolutely. Where you grow to a point where you realize, okay, if we really want to continue growing, we're going to have to take a big risk here. We're going to either have to hire more people, or go get a loan, or take the risk of opening another
new office.
Yes. All of these, and they're very scary moments in the life of an entrepreneur, because of the amount of risk involved. And if both partners are not aligned, or at least closely aligned, on how to manage that risk, or how the two people together will, again, negotiate how to handle those key points along the way, it can set the ground. Because then if you decide, oh, I'm going to go out and get a loan, and then you just do that, and the other person's feelings are hurt because you didn't necessarily, you know, take my feelings into consideration, and, you know, what about this, what about that? And so it can get very, very ugly very quickly.
And entrepreneurs are autonomous individuals. And they are really good at making decisions, and they don't always consult somebody when they're making a decision. So let's talk about how couples who find themselves married to entrepreneurs can get through that marriage sound-mindedly.
Right. So both people, this is where it's really important. A couple has to have an identity outside of the business. Like, that is the most important kind of thing to think about. So if the couple, the only thing there is to talk about is the business and the kids, then you're setting the groundwork for later on a really big problem, okay? Because eventually the business is going to start moving, and you won't have to pay as much attention to it.
It's true.
And then your kids are going to be grown and out of the house, and you're kind of stuck with your spouse, and you want to be able to like that person, and have things that are still in common between the two of you. And I'll tell you what, if I can give one message to the audience, please, 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 please pay attention to your marriage. Make it a top priority, more important than your business. Because if your business fails and your marriage fails, you got a massive failure on your hands. If your business fails and your marriage is still there, the two of you can build something else together, okay? But if the marriage is gone, then you've got yourself just a real catastrophe kind of building on your hand. Please make your marriage important. Even if you're listening to this, you're thinking, oh, I'm too busy with my business and my marriage is fine. We're in a good place. There's a possibility that you are, but a year from now, so just please make your marriage a priority. Meaning, establish with your spouse an identity that is separate from your business and separate from your children. You two have to have things that are in common that aren't your business and your kids. You have to like the other person,
right? It's true.
Yeah, it is true. And there you're going to, in the normal flow of a marriage, you're going to go through ups and downs, and there are going to be times when it's harder to do that, and that's just the truth. It's still going to be important that you both find your way back to each other. Okay, so it's okay if you're in a low point right now in your marriage. Totally fine. It happens. I'm married 29 years. Okay, so I can speak with some authority here. You're going to go through ups and downs, as long as during the down that you're both oriented towards figuring out eventually how to find your way back. If you're both we don't know how to do it right now, but we're just committed to doing it. Eventually you'll get there. And I would encourage you also to get therapy, find a good marriage counselor, find out your pastor who might be able to help you as well. There's people out there who can help in that situation.
And people are afraid to put their business out there. Not everyone can afford counseling.
It's true.
It's very expensive, But then if someone, let's say, have a pastor, keeping this on a Christian level, have a pastor that they can confide in. But then that person is so afraid of what a pastor may think of them, thinking that maybe, how could you not be able to maintain your marriage? Why are you struggling with your marriage? How do we as a society break free from that judgmental mindset that keep us bondage in these dark spaces that we just are dying to crawl out of?
Yeah, that is such a difficult question. I wish I had an answer. And because I think in many ways the church has failed, the larger church, globally speaking, has failed, because you have certain denominations that are so judgmental. If you get divorced, you can't come back to the church. And that's a terrible message to send. And so that makes people very self-conscious. It makes them want to not go to their pastor, because if they don't know exactly where their church is going to stand on the issue, they might get nervous. What if I say this and then I get kicked out of my church or something for even thinking about this? So it's a very difficult situation. I guess I would err towards, let's figure out how we can strengthen marriages so that divorce becomes less of an issue. I'm not anti-divorce, because there are situations, and God has established that there are parameters where divorce is reasonable. Like you said, with infidelity for sure, or sexual immorality. God has said, okay, that's a situation where divorce is acceptable or permissible. Permitted, is probably a better way to talk about it. Because God really doesn't like divorce. And I think that that's obvious through his word, but this is not about feeling, but he recognizes that people are going to do stupid stuff, and really hurtful things to other people, and he would never want to put, in particular, women who could be victimized more so than men in a bad marriage. So he has established certain rules that actually protect women specifically in a marriage relationship, and then in a divorce situation. So God really does care, and I want to be very clear too, God has a purpose for divorced families. God has a purpose for blended families and remarried families. He has a purpose for everything. He makes all things work together for the good of those who believe. So this is not about feeling ashamed or condemned if you are divorced or thinking about divorce. I'm not, ideally, I always err towards, let's keep marriages together, because I think generally things work better when most marriages stay together. But if you are being abused, even mentally abused, that is not a situation where God would expect you to stay in a marriage. That violates all kinds of commandments, and so you shouldn't you're supposed to treat each other with love. And when you're not doing that, when that's not happening, God does not expect you to be a doormat. If you are in an abusive situation of any kind, I promise you, God doesn't want you to stay there. There's nowhere in Scripture does that say that. So but if in the absence of extreme abuse, it really is important to try to keep the marriage together. The tricky part is that both people have to be equally committed to keeping the marriage together. What's very heartbreaking is when only one person is, and the other person is just checked out emotionally. And if one person desperately wants to get divorced, like, what are you supposed to do? You have to get divorced.
You said earlier, as far as physical infidelity, God allows people to get divorced. Let's talk about emotional infidelity. When I was going through some of the research, I realized a lot of men end up having physical affairs and women have emotional affairs. Can we dive a little deeper on emotional affairs? How couples who find themselves in that space can bounce out of that and make sure, again, talking about keeping marriages together, that it does not lead to divorce. Because having emotional affairs could really make you check out from your marriage, right? If you are invested in somebody else emotionally, all of that. Let's talk a little more.
I think betrayal is betrayal.
Betrayal.
Whether it's physical or emotional. And even when Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount was basically him saying, okay, all of the Ten Commandments and all the law, it's not just about what you do, it's about the condition of your heart. And so Jesus was saying, God, I mean, he doesn't want you to go murder somebody, obviously, but he also, if you hate somebody, that's as much as if you murdered them. Or if you lust after someone in your heart, he says this specifically, even if you don't act on that lust, if you are lusting after another person in your heart, that is the same as being unfaithful. Okay? So betrayal is betrayal. It doesn't matter the package that it comes in, whether it's emotional or an actual physical affair. And the Bible, is really clear about that. Jesus himself discussed that. So the real issue, though, is what to do then. Any marriage can bounce back from anything. And I have seen it with my own eyes, and I've witnessed it. And what a testimony it then becomes for God when that happens. It is a long and painful process. So I don't want to, there's always hope. Always there's hope, but I don't want to be like unicorns and rainbows. It's not like, next week it'll be fine. The reality is, when there's been any kind of affair, whether it's a physical affair or an emotional affair, it's very important to understand what drove that person to behave in that way. What was wrong in the marriage that kind of opened that door. Okay, and it just meant that there, at some point in the marriage, there was something where that person felt like their needs were not getting met, and they, at some point, felt the need to get their needs met in this other way. Emotionally,
yeah,
even or physically, or both. And so that rift that was in the marriage that kind of led one person to just kind of go astray needs to be addressed. And because sometimes it's not a matter of that the problem goes away, it's like, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to deal with this issue? And so that it's healing, and that we can stay together going forward and be a stronger marriage afterward. And that's really the goal. So any kind of infidelity, any kind of betrayal is a symptom of the problem. It's not the problem. It's just like, it's the physical symptoms. So all of a sudden, you can have a cancerous tumor growing in your body. You don't know a thing about it till it gets to a certain point where it becomes, you have to recognize it because it's so big. And now all of a sudden that symptom is showing, oh yeah, this thing has been growing for a long time and you just didn't know because it didn't get to big enough until it became a problem. There's a symptom that developed. Infidelity of any kind is the same thing. It is a symptom of something that had been wrong underneath of it for some time. And so the solution to back to wholeness, a whole marriage, involves, let's figure out what happened that caused this person to want to do this. So then there's the healing of the sense of betrayal that has to happen. So there's the person who is betrayed, and then there has to be repentance. There has to be repentance. There has to be that person who did the betrayal come back and say, I really screwed up, and I know I did, and I'm so sorry, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it better. There has to be that mentality going back in, real repentance, an understanding of how that person hurt the first person. But then the person who did not do the betrayal, they have to understand that in some way they behaved in the marriage, whether knowingly or unknowingly. A lot of this stuff is so unconscious because of our own personal pain. It's very complicated. But they have to understand they did something in the marriage that contributed to the rift that then resulted in the symptom of this person going out.
Right.
And then being aware, like, okay, this is how I hurt this person in this way. And then they have to be willing to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore.
But so I think some of the challenges is once that betrayal happens, once that trust is broken, couples find it hard to bounce back.
Sure.
Because then when you step out, the other person is keeping tabs on you. When your phone is there, the other person is going through it. But how well can couples just go through this bouncing back from a betrayal and recognizing that I can forgive this person wholeheartedly and act like it never happened and just be able to get through the marriage? You know, I just think people will struggle or do struggle with the concept that if somebody else broke that trust, especially, you know, in the case of an affair, then the person who was betrayed really have no more security. And sometimes the individuals will be keeping tabs on you, monitoring every move, and then the person that caused the betrayal have to forever succumb to either pacifying this person or proving that they've changed. It's just exhausting.
Yeah, well, okay, a couple things. One is that not forever. So as with any wound, emotional wound, there is a time of healing that has to happen that takes whatever time it's going to take. So in the instance of a betrayal, a marital betrayal of any kind, the healing from that wound is probably going to take years. And I don't want to like sugarcoat this. It's not, and there has to be, when I say it takes years, it means years of work. You can get to a point, the couple can get to a point where there is true forgiveness and trust is absolutely reestablished. 100%. And it's not that they act like the incident never happened, because just like with any emotional wound, you can't act like it never happened. It did, and you don't erase it. But the impact of it is gone.
So divorce is hard, and it has serious impacts on individuals' wellness. Can you, from a psychological standpoint, just walk us through the impact it have on people's wellness, and then we could talk about how people can ultimately achieve wellness, happiness, and wholeness.
Amen. Divorce is usually after a period of high stress time. So there's the stress on the body and on your mind that really can exacerbate or create a lot of psychological issues. So if you think about and then the divorce in and of itself is a process. It is something that takes time to go through, and there are a lot of major life decisions that have to be made during the process of a couple getting divorced. People have to decide, where are we going to live? Where's the money going to come from? Where two different households now have to be established. What does that look like? The children have to be taken care of, and what does that look like? Who's going to have custody, and what does that custody look like? And are there places for the kids to sleep in each of these new households that are being established? And then all along the way, these major decisions are forced on the couple, and then they have to come to some sort of conclusion amidst all the hurt feelings. So these major life decisions have to come along with, well, I can't trust so-and-so to ever make a decision that's going to be in my best interest. And they're hurting my feelings constantly through this whole process. All this to say that it can be a degrading process on someone's mental health, because it can just chip away at someone's sense of who they are as a person, and then the high stress that comes with making these tough decisions. And then if the relationship is so conflicted, like if the couple just cannot have positive relationship or positive communication at all with each other, it makes it even harder. And so that can lead to someone developing depression, like a major clinical depression. They can get to the point where they start to feel helpless, and they may even start to feel hopeless. They have a difficulty sleeping. Even their eating habits might change. They might find themselves eating more than they normally do, or find themselves eating less than they typically do, and that can have an impact on their weight. The effect of stress and chronic stress on your body, on your immune system, is direct, and it's very significant. And so being under chronic stress means that your body is constantly revved up, so to speak, and your body wasn't designed to be revved up continually over a span of time. And so that will weaken your immune system. So then all of a sudden you become more susceptible to physical disease, in addition to depression. You can develop a sense of anxiety, like not necessarily feeling ever safe where you are, because if you were coming out of a marriage where you didn't feel safe for some reason, and then if the divorce process in and of itself is rather tumultuous, it's going to lead to this chronic sense of I'm always being threatened, or I'm constantly living under a sense of someone's going to hurt me, someone's going to either hurt my feelings or threaten me physically, or threaten to take away money that I might need or not give me money. Anyway, a chronic sense of not feeling secure and safe, and that can lead to heightened anxiety, which can develop into an anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, certain phobias, even panic attacks. So divorce can really just ratchet up all kinds of psychological problems. And then if you came into the marriage with any issues, okay, those are going to rear their ugly heads. So things that you thought you hadn't thought about for a long time, now all of a sudden that you're in this terrible life situation, those issues are going to come back up. And it's so important to get help because people tend to think that, and I understand why it happens, when you get overwhelmed with all of the psychological turmoil, it feels like it's this weight that's on you, and it can be very difficult to kind of pull yourself out of that and reach for the phone and ask for help. But that is so important that people do that, because if you go through this alone, it's just going to make it so much worse for everybody. If you try to keep things together in your own head and try to pretend to the world like everything's fine when it's not, eventually you're going to break down.
And you are talking about after the divorce have happened.
Even
right?
during and after. I mean, at any point, really. I mean, anytime you're under any kind of emotional distress, you should reach out for help. If you think that it's only really affecting you and it's only in your own head, you're wrong. It's I always say that our wounds bleed on other people. Okay, so if you're going through something, at some point in time, other people are going to realize that you're just not on your A game. You're not showing up in the way that you could or that you have in the past. And
then it start having effects on your career, your finance, your social circle. It just cascades down.
Because all that emotional turmoil takes a toll. It requires resources from you internally that then you can't devote to something else.
Right.
So if you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, now you have fewer resources to devote to your business as well. So this is a big deal. It really is a big deal. And it's very important that even, if you're hearing my voice now and you're there and you're not reaching out for help, take this as a sign. It's time to pick up the phone and ask for help. So find a qualified, licensed mental health professional in your area who can walk with you through this. Go to your church, and if your pastor's not available, find out who that pastor would refer you to. Perhaps your church has a counseling ministry that you can go to and just get some support. No one was meant to go through life alone.
Right.
And particularly challenging times.
So you wrote this book, Be Still. Again, available on Amazon under Anita Merkasani, and her name would be in the video, so just so you can get a correct spelling. So Dr. Anita, talk to us about how we can find practical strategies to go through divorce. Individuals who have gone through divorce. And if you have gone through divorce and you have your own special strategies that you use to cope through it, we want to hear from you. Leave a comment. We are going to hear from Dr. Anita, but I also want to hear from you, from your personal experience with divorce and how you get through it, because your story really could help somebody else. So let's talk about Be Still, you know, the practical solutions that individuals who have gone through divorce can cope.
So Be Still, the title of the book comes from Psalm 46:10, in which God tells his people, and if you read actually all of Psalm 46, you'll find out that it is about God speaking to his people who are going through a very, very difficult time. He talks about the mountains are crumbling into the sea, and the cities the kingdoms are on fire. And during all of this tumultuous time, God tells his people, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And so when God tells us to be still, what he's telling us is in these times of crisis, when you are in emotional turmoil and it feels like the internal mountains in your brain, like all the things that you could count on, everything is crumbling away and you feel like you don't know what to do, he gives you a very specific strategy, and that is to be still. Now the trick is, how do you be still? And that is where it can be very hard, because what God means when he says be still, he means that you are supposed to, when you look at the Hebrew word, actually where this originally came from, what it was originally written in Hebrew, the word that he uses, that we translate in English as be still, means to surrender. And it means to stop striving. And that's tough, because when we're in a tough situation, we want to fix it. We want to, we're going to fix it. We're going to control this. We're going to tell this person, here's how to do this, and we're going to stand up for ourselves, and we're going to make this happen. And what God is telling us is, stop striving.
Let me handle it.
Exactly. Because honestly, there are situations that we are trying to control that we can't. And yet we still try. And that's called striving. Okay? And that's different than like actually controlling things that we are supposed to control. We have limits, though, around us as human beings. And God is actually okay with those limits, by the way. Like, he's the one who installed the limits in our lives. So he's just fine with the fact that we have limits. We seem to not be okay with the fact that we have limits and things that we're not supposed to be trying to control. So what he's telling us in Be Still, and the message here, is stop striving. Stop trying to control things that you don't have any authority to control. So the trick about being still is that it's hard. It is not our normal way of thinking and the stuff that go through our heads. We're used to our minds being very busy, very just like almost the equivalent of a hurricane moving through our heads. And we're used to multitasking. We're used to just kind of boom, 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 boom. That is the opposite of stillness, of course. And so though we try to hand things over to the Lord and ask him to take care of them for us, but then a couple hours later, we find ourselves thinking about it again, trying to manage it again, trying to control things again that we're not supposed to control. And so my joke is that it's like we lend our problems to God. We don't actually surrender them to him. We just say, here, hold this for a couple hours, and then we take it right back. When God really wants us to hand over to surrender to him,
Complete surrender.
So think about what it means to surrender. So when two armies are battling each other and one decides to surrender to the other, what they're doing is they're saying, I'm admitting this other army is more powerful. This other entity is more powerful than I am, and I can't fight anymore. And surrender is permanent. And I think just understanding that God doesn't hate people who are divorced, and so we shouldn't. God's not rejecting people who are divorced, and so we shouldn't. That is not a criteria to get into heaven by any stretch, okay? And that we all have failure in different parts of our lives. Even if our marriage is successful, there's other things that we have failed in and at. And so in terms of judging, we need to be really careful about that, because watch before you take the speck out of your neighbor's eye, look at the plank in your own eye. I mean, that's hypocrisy. So I think anytime we are geared towards judging, we really and I mean, God does tell us we can judge with righteous judgment, with His judgment, but we're not supposed to lack compassion in it, and we're supposed to judge rightly.
Right.
And judging someone because they were divorced, that is not a right judgment.
And just because somebody is married, does not mean they are spiritually not divorced.
That's
right?
true.
Somebody could be married, living in the same house, going about their business, wearing the rings, and both partners have checked out.
Yes.
So as a society, judging people who the rings are off, they have the label or the status divorce, does not really mean they have failed at life.
No.
Because not everyone who is married is happily married, and not everyone who has the ring on is really spiritually still married to their spouse, and people could be checked out.
So this book is about how we can bring Jesus back into our mental health care and the importance of actually prioritizing your mental health. So what this does is I teach where emotional wounds come from, how they develop, both psychologically and spiritually, the things that happen to us as kids, how it affects us as adults, and why we really need to make a priority out of healing, emotional healing, and how we functionally, practically, we can learn to rely on God to do this. And so I give, in one chapter, there's 10 very specific strategies on how you can help yourself be still, how you can go through different strategies, different techniques to help wind your brain down so that you can get to that point of being still before the Lord. And the goal is to be able to hear His word directly to your heart. So, and in doing so, it's healing, like immediate. And I have seen it before my eyes when I've worked with people one-on-one, and I now do retreats and conferences where I teach people these things, and then they have experiences. We have opportunities to go off, and ladies are praying, and they're coming back with just incredible stories of healing that happens like that. And it's tremendous. And so it's been a real honor to be able to work with all of these people along the way for the past 3 years or so. So please, you can find me too on Facebook, Be Still with Dr. Anita. And I have a group actually, as well as a page. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @RealDrAnita. And I look forward to interacting with you on social media.
So guys, we have been talking to Dr. Anita about divorce, the impact it has on people's wellness, and how people can ultimately heal emotionally if individuals have gone through divorce. And let us create a better society where we are helping everybody heal, but preaching the right way to heal, and which is exactly what this book is about. So go on Amazon and grab your copy. You are going to change your life. Maybe buy it as a gift for somebody. Leave comments. Let us hear from you on this topic, because a lot of people, 39% of marriages end in divorce. My goodness, that is quite a high number. So again, we thank you for watching, and until next time, remember, our truths are best lived when we dare the moment. Take care.
Thank you for watching this episode. To continue with the conversation, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell or notification button to be notified every time new videos get uploaded. Also, click thumbs up to like the video and follow our Instagram and Facebook pages to catch up on all the conversations.